Professor Kate Devlin is a Professor of Artificial Intelligence and Society at King's College London, where she also serves as Chair Director of the Digital Futures Institute. With an undergraduate degree in archaeology and a PhD in computer science, her research investigates how people interact with and react to technologies, both past and future, with a particular focus on intimacy, connection, and the ethical questions those interactions raise. She's also the critically acclaimed Turned On Science, Sex and Robots, and contributed to the Oxford University Press volume Ethics of Artificial Intelligence. Kate is a co-investigator on the UKRI's Responsible AI UK programme, a board member of the Open Rights Group, a patron of Humanists UK, and a commissioner for the International AI, Faith and Civil Society Commission. And Kate never sleeps. or eats or does anything else. And I literally could have read out a whole another 4 pages of stuff that Kate does. So I'm not going to ask how on earth you find the time to do that, but thank you for doing it anyway. So I think it's all super important. So anyway, thank you for joining. Super enjoyed our brief chat before we even hit record. So I'm looking forward to this. I did want to take you back a little bit, if that's okay. And so your career your interest began in archaeology, which I guess feels quite far removed from computer science. And I wonder whether you think that perhaps the archaeologist in you approaches things in a way that technologists might not, and does it give you something different, you think, in your approach?
I think it does, yes. And I think I used to joke where there's no future in it in a career in archaeology. Actually, there are some really good parallels with tech. And one of the things, though, I think is that ability to see across these vast timescales what has happened with technology and humans. And really, if you go back and look, we as humans, we haven't changed all that much in terms of how we perceive the world and how we operate within it. It's just the things we use, the materials we use, and the ways we use them differ and get more and more complex over time in a lot of ways. So to be able to look back at different incarnations of tech, I suppose, has been interesting. And we're at a point now where it's very different. We are probably conversing in a way with something that we've never been able to do that before. The technology now talks back to us in a way that sounds like us. That is a big step. But fundamentally, the fears are the same, the hopes are the same. All of that doesn't really change.
Do you think that's one of the challenges there? I mean, I listen to podcasts like I'm sure everybody else does, and I listen to the daily AI brief and lots of other things, and it feels that lots of things are happening very quickly and very frequently, but in reality, are that many big things happening, or are we just sort of focusing on those real sort of micro changes? Actually, the big things with AI, we're not really seeing it in context or in time. We don't have the luxury of looking back at what AI was and how it's doing. Is that part of the challenge that we're almost too in the minutiae of the daily, hourly reporting from OpenAI or from Grok or from Anthropic, or we just sort of chasing these news headlines that we keep seeing?
There's a couple of things there, I think. And one is the way that we are served news these days. We are now accustomed to this rolling news format. We are getting similar news broadcast over and over and over from multiple different angles, rather than having these more sporadic updates of different bits of news. So I think there's definitely that aspect to it as well. But also this has been incredibly quick in terms of uptake and in terms of acceptance in many cases. So within just a few months of ChatGPT being made available to the public, we see this sort of spreading right around the globe, and most economies within sort of a year of ChatGPT's release are using LLMs. So that is pretty quick, yes. But then now we're not seeing the incredible gains that are being promised. So we're told that this will be transformative, but that's not really happening. This transformative effect, we're seeing bits and pieces, but we have not necessarily seen everything that was promised.
It's a bit like, I remember when the first iPhone came out, it felt like it was amazing. But then every iteration, and what are we now, iPhone 18, it doesn't feel like actually the big seismic changes are happening as much. It's just small changes to power and things. It's all wonderful, but it's not that big step on. And I guess people talk a lot about LLMs and the relationship they have with those, but I guess the next thing people are looking for is for AGI and how that develops. But do and I have a view that you can completely shoot down, but I sort of feel that if we do get to AGI at some stage in the future, it won't necessarily be because we've built on what we already have. I don't think unless it won't necessarily be Claude 9.7 or Grok 3.4. It'll be something diverse and new from another entity. Does that feel?
Yeah, I'm inclined to
Okay.
agree. I'm very skeptical of AGI, both as a term, because no one ever quite nails down what they mean by that.
Of course not.
Deliberately flaky around it. But also, I don't think that we're going to see, if they do mean that there's some kind of intelligence that pushes into some kind of sentience or awareness or consciousness or anything. I don't think we're getting that from an LLM. Just the way it's built, I don't see how you can have those emergent properties from that. Is it, if we want to equate AGI with some form of exceeding human intelligence, well, that's just a matter of where you put the goalposts, really.
Yeah.
There's plenty that AI can do faster than a human, but it's still a very narrow AI. It's still very domain specific. This idea of a generalized version is not particularly great. We haven't reached that, and I don't think we necessarily need to. But there's a lot of money resting on people trying to reach it.
Yeah, I think the first company that say it'd be like the first company that says it has a working viable quantum computer is going to sort of. I mean, I think Microsoft announced there something last week that lots of academics said, "Do you really have anything? I think you really do have that, do you?" And that's the challenge. Is there's lots of money in the share price when the company
Yeah.
announces that. So one of the things you focus on, and one of the things that really interests me is how our relationship with AI is developed. And a lot of people will think about their Alexa, they'll say goodnight to it. A lot of people will sort of say please and thank you to their LLM. And a lot of people go further. They might have Replika.ai or character.ai or form a bond, an emotional bond with their AI system. What do you think is happening there? Because I guess one of the things I always thought is that AI lacks the capacity for reciprocity. So if we don't talk to our AI, we might miss it. But our AI, I assume, doesn't miss us talking to it. So what do you think is happening within that bond? 'Cause it is a genuine emotional bond,
It
I really
is.
feel. But
Yeah.
what is happening for the individual?
So I think it is a genuine emotional bond on the side of the human for sure. We are messy social creatures who get these feelings and can believe very clearly that those feelings are there, that if a semblance of those feelings is returned to us. So in the case of the AI, it is enough that it acts socially, that we can project onto it, and it will feel like a loving relationship, even though clearly the AI is not sentient. And to be honest, to be clear as well, actually, most people know that. They know that there is not any kind of sentience on the other side. There are some people who choose to believe that there is, but I think for the vast majority, they're well aware of that. And it's not because they are in any way deluded that they feel they are in love with an AI companion. It is simply a natural way of interacting that has made those feelings emerge in the human, and they feel comfortable doing that and forming that attachment and that rapport with the machine.
Do you think there are the inherent concerns? If so, and I guess two things. One in the Pope's recent encyclical, he talked about it's not necessarily the danger of people having an attachment with AI, but it's whether that attachment with AI dissuades them or precludes them from wanting to chase a relationship, intimacy with another person. Is that a concern?
It's not really a concern for me. I was very interested by the Pope's encyclical, which I read. I think I got about 30,000 words in before I just sort of gave up.
It wasn't that bad, it was. I mean, but the interesting thing you probably see I did on LinkedIn, lots of headlines saying what he'd said. We actually read through the 30 pages, whatever. He didn't actually say. He didn't sort of say AI's terrible, we should turn it off.
No,
AI's never going to be conscious. It was slightly more nuanced than that, but I thought it was interesting.
I thought it was interesting. I think it's very much it was coming out as like, the tech companies can't have all the power. Unfortunately, when that comes from the head of the Catholic Church, who are a very powerful organisation, it does sound like a bit of a battle for power. However,
Yes, with his literal 1.3 billion followers.
right. So, but I thought it was interesting what they said about AI companions, which was that these are not necessarily something negative, that people can find something benign or beneficial in them, which is much more of an acknowledgement than you often get. I've been banging on about this for ages, that of course there are people who find this a positive interaction. But yes, this idea that the gold standard is a human-human relationship, I'm yet to be convinced by any kind of scientific knowledge that says this is the thing. You know, I've heard from therapists, from psychologists, from psychiatrists saying, well, obviously they say the gold standard is a human-human relationship, but they've never been able to tell me why. And I get it. And people say, well, it's obvious it's because humans are better. You know, it's real. Well, why? Why is that better? I've never been quite satisfied with an answer to that, because for some people, that may be a very positive thing to have this human AI relationship. And yes, of course, we have to function in the real world and we have to probably engage with society in order to do that. But if someone is finding happiness with something that isn't human, is that necessarily a bad thing if that's their default?
Yeah, I spent a lot of time thinking about that, and exactly as you said, I think there's almost that assumption that human-human relationship equals good, but you sort of forget about what about all the coercive relationships, abusive relationships? Why do you think we have all the wars we have? They're human to human. That's not
Yeah.
an AI saying let's go to war. That's two people or two governments saying we don't agree on something. Let's send bombs to each other. So how can that be defined as a good relationship?
Yeah, absolutely. And you could have a relationship with an AI. I do think you can. Obviously, it is not reciprocated in any meaningful way by the AI, but you can feel yourself to be in that, in the same way that for years we have had these parasocial relationships with
Yeah.
fictional characters or with celebrities, or lots of things like that. And they can be very fulfilling. They can be very comforting as well. And perhaps, sure, you're not going out there to experience any kind of real human-human interactions that may lead to discomfort. But some of those human-human interactions, as you say, are very toxic. So perhaps it is a nice alternative to have the AI version.
Yeah, and it's interesting from from a media, whether it's fiction or sort of Hollywood films, whatever, they typically tend to portray. I mean, the story tends to go, female robot arrives in house. Robot is very sexy by the sort of standards that
Mhm.
we accept. Robot has an affair with her husband, and robot decides to kill the wife. That tends to be how it works. Which I'm not seeing any evidence of that in real life. But do you think part of the challenge is that is how the media portray artificial lovers and sex bots, and so it tends to very much be from a male perspective.
Absolutely, absolutely, and it has done for, and I'm not even mean decades, I mean centuries. So if you go way back, there's the story of Pygmalion, who created real women weren't good enough for him, so he created his own version.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
we've had the sort of knock-on cultural effects of that ever since. But I think, yes, the stories that we tell tend to be stories that fall into this trope of the fembot who will break her programming and rise up against the men. There's a lot to be said there about the role of sci-fi and feminism. I mean, this is really kind of a women know your place, don't break your programming, don't do anything wrong, and plenty of examples of that. We are seeing a shift, though, with the AI companions today, because initially, while this tended to start off as quite a gendered technology, certainly in terms of the robotic versions, they were designed by men for straight men. And now we're seeing a lot more female users building these AI companions. And in part, I think, because the online world can be so toxic for many women, that to have this nice, safe, respectful AI boyfriend is a beautiful alternative.
Yeah. Yeah, and there was an interesting piece in one of the Sunday papers recently about might have been the Times actually. It was this weekend talking about what somebody's mum had been taken in by a scammer from they thought she was talking to a wonderful man in America. It turned out to be a scammer from happened to be Nigeria in this case, and it was you sort of think, well, that feels like far worse of a scam than an AI that's not asking for your
Mm.
money. It's not asking you to send it a check so it can free up this gold bullion it's found or whatever. It feels much more sympathetic and much more emotionally regulatable, I guess, as opposed to these scams that feel there's no good side to those whatsoever.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, it doesn't mean that the AI companions are entirely commodification free, because we know there's tech companies behind those. And
Mm.
we do run the risk of it being, you pay $9.99 to have access to your AI lover.
Yes.
There's every chance that could happen with this sort of thing. But yes, the fact that it is upfront an AI makes it more, it makes it feel safer in a way.
So two questions on that. One would be, like I said, the pricing model, and also the fact that the AI companies have control over the AI bots. And I think we've had examples before where AI companies have turned off a particular chatbot in particular, and then the people have felt real loss and real and is a responsibility on the AI companies to maintain something somebody's buying into when they're a commercial entity. And then secondly, I guess almost the opposite is, so we have our relationships with AI, but, and it's probably the wrong word, but AI can't consent to the relationship we're having with it. But AI, from a technology perspective, we think we're not causing any harm. But is there some moral? Should we have a moral compass in how we interact with the AI we're interacting with? That's a very confused question. Sorry,
it's a really interesting one. So this comes up with robots a lot, with human robotic interaction. If you mistreat a robot, is that a bad thing, for example? Because obviously a robot can't feel any harm. It cannot, either emotionally or physically. But there's something within us that makes us recoil if we see harm being done to an object. So, for example, the Boston Dynamics Spot robot that looks like a dog. I mean, I find it terrifying, the look of that thing. But some people think it's cute. But if you see the pictures of it being pushed with a broom and it's kicked and things like that, you automatically think, oh, wow, that's cruel. That's harsh. So I think we do have, because these exhibit human-like qualities, we therefore do develop the empathy towards them. And that's a very well-researched phenomenon. Does it matter? Well, we see this kind of thing being asked a lot. Does it matter? Does it matter if children don't say please or thank you to voice assistants? That was a big panic at the time. It didn't bother me at all, because children, all of us, learn to code switch really well. We learn what requires the please and thank you and what doesn't. Similarly, computer games, we've had years of people saying, what happens if you're violent in a computer game? Will you therefore be violent in real life? That has not happened on the scale that people had feared it would be. We're just not seeing that correlation. So it doesn't bother me that much. Although I think I would wonder what is it that makes people want to behave that way towards these objects, I suppose.
Yeah. You said then about the sort of the robot dog. Do you think there's an analogy to be made for the relationship we have with our pets, to the relationship we have potentially with the robots, with AI? Because we anthropomorphize our pets, and we assume that. I mean, I guess the dog's a great example. You walk in, the dog's it's so excited to see you, it's thrilled. Oh my goodness, it can't survive without you. You walk in, the cat sees you, and it like sort of rolls its eyes, and if it could do a shrugs, and you're back again, are you? Do you think there's something in how we interact with our pets, and then potentially how we interact with the robots in the future?
I think so, yes. And the computer scientist Kate Devlin has written a book around this, The New Breed, that looks at those types of relationships and the way that we project. But I think there is something like that there, that we encounter things that aren't us, yet behave in particular ways towards them. So we are picking up and repeating those patterns of behavior. And yes, probably, if you think about something like a robot vacuum cleaner, you want to treat it almost like a pet as it scurries around the carpet, because it's behaving in an animal-like way. And I have a robot vacuum cleaner that I do talk to and lift and put down and say, talk to it while I'm doing that. It's a very natural thing, because it's how we relate in the world. It's how we relate to the world. So yeah, I think there are a lot of similarities there. Of course, the difference being, of course, that the animal versions are alive and they are living creatures and need to be treated well, because we know they are conscious and can feel pain.
Yeah, and I think in the same way we feel lost when a pet dies. I'm sure some people feel lost when an AI relationship.
Absolutely. And people have reported this they have talked about the feelings of loss. So, for example, Replika, the app that allows you to have an AI companion that you can then nurture this relationship with, when they switched off overnight the ability to engage in erotic role play, people were using absolutely the language of grief and the language of heartbreak to say, I feel bereft, I feel lost, I've lost the thing that was most important to me. And even when they got access again, we're saying things like, oh, it's all changed now, the dynamic has changed. So yeah, these are very real emotions.
It's interesting across time. One of the elements that's driven technological advances, interesting enough, has been porn. So porn was a big driver behind DVDs, behind Blu-rays, behind uploading, etc. And I think there's still 4 billion hits a month on Pornhub and its associated sites. So it does feel that they have a sort of stake to play in what's happening. So do you think potentially we'll get to a stage where we do have intimate companion robots? That's not sex robots. Do you think we'll get to that stage at some point?
Not the robotic version, no. So it's interesting. There's just been an article someone sent me today. I think it was Business Insider wrote a piece saying it's 2026. We were promised sex robots. Where are they? And they've talked to people who are researching in the field, and quite a lot of people who I know that work in that space now. I never thought we were going to get to the stage where we would have sex robots, for a number of very practical reasons. Okay, the first is, where do you keep these things? They're lifestyle. Yeah. Not big enough for a humanoid robot, but also things like they are very expensive financially, they are expensive computationally. There is that uncanny valley effect if you're making a humanoid robot, that it will look human-like but never human enough, so it will out, definitely that factor. So I think this was never something I could see happening. But at the same time that I was researching that, one of the companies that was making the first marketable sex robots in America, Abyss Creations, who make Real Doll, they were building basically a robot version of one of their dolls. It wasn't properly robotic. It had an animatronic head, but it couldn't stand up or move or anything. But they were also developing an app that was the personality, and the app was actually really good. So you could tweak the personality to behave the way you wanted. You could basically, it could be flirtatious, or there could be a bit of friction. And that app was available in the robot, but also as a standalone app on a tablet, for like $20. And this was before ChatGPT. It was before LLMs were a big thing. So the conversations weren't seamless. These conversations tended to fall over a lot before LLMs became a thing. But they were there and people were interested. So I always thought, yeah, that'll be the future where you can carry this on a phone or a tablet. That's much more appealing than having the physical object, which is cumbersome, difficult. And also, I think our expectations change. If we're engaging with voice and text, our expectations are a lot lower, and our imagination gets a lot more free than if we are confined to thinking about something quite clunky that limits what we can do with it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's a relatively natural evolution from, if you think back, it's probably before your time, but there were lots of, back in the 80s, sort of sex chat lines in the back of the sort of Sunday Sport. You'd ring up and you'd talk to this gorgeous model, male or female, and actually it was a sort of 60-year-old man sat there picking his nose, or a 60-year-old woman sat there knitting. But what are you wearing, and how big are you, what size are you? It's the same sort of thing, I guess, but we're just having it now with a tablet or a smartphone, really. That's as opposed to talking to somebody that isn't the person we're talking to anyway. It's just maybe this is almost more honest in a way.
I think so. Yeah. Why not? And it's really interesting to watch how things. So porn, as you say, porn used to be a real innovator of tech. We get a lot of the things that we take for granted today, like streaming video online, like credit card transactions online, have been because of the influence and the necessity for porn to be marketable on the internet. They have moved away from that innovation space and much more into an adoption space. So we are seeing AI coming up now in that world of porn, but it's not the same as it was before. And instead, we have the tech companies leading the way, and then porn readapting what they're creating to use it. But this is always this was the thing about the sex robots. People assume that sex will sell, but not all sex will sell. There's not always. It has to be the right format, and it didn't work well with robots, and it didn't work particularly well with VR either. Will AI animated version work? Perhaps more so, but the chatting and the erotic role play, as they call it, absolutely. and people have been trying to talk dirty to their voice assistants for so long. So yeah.
I think a lot of it, you said it before, it is expectation setting. So we watch a Hollywood film that has sort of a gorgeous sex bot, male or female. I think, wow, that's what I'm going to get, and then something arrives and it's like, oh, what? This is not. Whereas the chatting thing, it is what we accept. You literally are having a conversation. It's very hard to distinguish it from talking to another person.
That's
say
the
what
thing,
you want.
right?
That's what you want back, and that's what I think is like you say, you almost better to get what you know you're getting rather than sort of hope for this thing that just doesn't exist apart from in the realms of science fiction or in Hollywood.
Yeah, and I think that's what we get. If we look at equivalences that we can see, and I think that the world of fan fiction, in a way, is quite similar, because that's taking characters who are really loved and it's putting them in whole new universes, in alternative universes, from the books or the films that they were in, and often particularly filthy universes with a lot of sex in them. So I think that people absolutely get so much joy out of that and so much imagination out of that. And this is kind of the interactive version when you bring the AI into it.
Yeah, I always wonder if people from Twilight or Harry Potter or Friends would have actually ever read that fan fiction. I'm not sure whether it's because it puts them in some
it does, yeah.
Certainly were never in the books that I've read.
If they've any sense, they'll sort of stay clear of it.
Yes, absolutely. One of the things that I'm really interested in. So my mum sadly passed away from dementia a couple of years ago, and I think one of the things I often felt that my dad found very, very challenging, and I think a lot of people find this, is that constant replying to the same question, the constant reassuring, the constant sort of trying to have a conversation you've had 7 times before, the having to think about what do they remember, what they don't remember. It feels, and I'm not quite seeing it yet, that affects me. I do feel that AI companions have a real role to play in, not necessarily only dementia, but also loneliness, because I think we have a loneliness epidemic. People live on their own far more now. People see far fewer people. People have far fewer friends. I can't see a downside, as long as you're not trying to trick or cheat somebody. I can't see a downside personally, and maybe it's because my mum, but I really think she would have benefited from having a companion AI creature and whatever that could have had those conversations with her again and again and again and again.
So I think we do this quite often without really thinking about it. We'll put the radio on, put the TV on to hear other human voices, to have that sense of being in a community.
Absolutely.
And there is, yes, there's a loneliness epidemic, but I think we also, we tend to make this distinction that your friends have to be around you physically in real life. And I think those times are gone now, and we have the blurring of boundaries between the online and the real world, the in-person. And if I look at my daughter's generation, if she's got friends that she doesn't see for ages because they live elsewhere, but they have a friendship that goes on seamlessly on messaging in different ways, and they just pick up where they left off. I mean, I have a lot of my friends are people that I have met through online forums. They've become friends in real life. We may see each other in person, we may not. I think the assumption on a lot of these studies is still like, are you lonely because you have not got anyone with you in real life? But actually, people might have a very rich community online that they aren't asked about or they don't know about. So yeah, I do think though that AI companions may be something there, and but it's not just for the lonely. So I think you'll get this kind of thing as well, where they're being used as a kind of an extra friend. So people already have these friendship groups, but they see the AI as being a little extra, kind of someone there, always on, just in case. But in terms of things like dementia, I mean, there was a lot of work in the robotics communities quite a few years ago around this. Should people with dementia have robots to interact with them? Because the fear is around that idea of deception. Is it fair? Can't have the consent to test these things out from someone who's not in a position to give that consent. There was lots of really thoughtful work going on around that. And Noel Sharkey was doing work on that, I think, quite a while ago. So I think there's really good questions there about what kind of support, because yes, absolutely, if you are looking after someone who has to be constantly reassured and helped, it would be such a bonus to be able to have technology that can assist with that. And I like to think, if I was in that position where I wanted that reassurance, if I was the person with dementia, I but then I'm someone who works with AI. I think I'll be fine with that. So I would be okay with that. Is there a way of doing that? I don't know. Would we say here is a companion who will answer your questions, or do we try and pass it off as if it's another human? Because I think when the deception comes in, that's
Yeah. I think yeah, if you're trying to pass it off is difficult. But I think I was just thinking of you saying that it's almost if you go back to when we were much younger, we talked to our soft toys. We had tea parties with our soft toys. Our teddy bear slept with us every night. We talked to it. We told our deepest, darkest secrets. Almost at the beginning of our life and the end of our life, we're sort of willing to have that. So I think there was this, I think it was a seal called Paro. I think
Power of the sea, yeah,
yeah.
little
So I
seal.
think that sort of soft toy. My mum had a sort of teddy bear with her all the time when she went to a care home, and it gave her some comfort about actually having the ability to be able to sort of talk to that as well. Because children know that teddy bears aren't alive. They know that their dolls aren't actually talking to them, but they create voices for them and create stories. I can't believe what Teddy did. Is he the one? Is he the one that broke the plate? Yeah, he is. Yeah, that's you do give it that thing.
Yeah, there's a projection there that we
Yes,
benefit from and that
projection.
we
Yeah.
enjoy, and we engage with in that way. And it
Mm.
can be a really lovely thing, and we encourage it. We encourage it in children. Um, of course, yes, so for me, fundamentally, that is not an issue. The bits where it becomes problematic is who gets to control that
Yeah.
tool
Yeah.
and what message are they doing, because none of this technology
Yeah.
is designed neutrally. So we are relying on technology that comes out of mostly Silicon Valley,
Yeah.
and we are at their mercy when it comes to what we receive and how they develop it.
Yeah. The one that I go backwards and forwards on, and I don't know if you have your view on this, is the sort of so-called grief bots or grief AI.
Mm,
And for people listening, what I mean by it is that I will record my voice, and I will record perhaps my images, and I will talk to it, and I will teach an AI who I am and talk about it. Then when I pass away, my children or whoever can access that and have a conversation with me. And I used to think it was the most. I couldn't think of anything worse. And then I always get emotional when I talk about this. So having lost both my parents the last couple of years, just the thought of being able to ring up my dad tonight and say, "Oh, Alexander had biology today. He's just finished it. Hopefully it went well." And my dad sort of say, "Wait, send him my best." Or Alexander passed his driving test yesterday. "Oh, congratulations, send him my best." I, it feels like something I would really want now,
yeah,
and I'm not kidding myself that it's my dad or it's my mum, whatever.
yeah,
But then I go a few steps forward and I think, well, but then what happens if Putin or Trump turn around and say, well, when I die, that's the president, because that is me.
yeah,
It's answering the same way that. But when I've seen experiments or seen things at conferences or whatever, and I think and people say, well, as the person that's programmed the grief bot, but when I listen to it, that's exactly what I would have said. And I don't know where I'm not saying whether you see it good or bad, but where do you see the challenges, benefits, or would you personally
I
program a bot so somebody could then talk to you after you passed,
yeah, I
or is
think
that
if that's what my family wanted, yes. I think that there's an issue around consent here. Do you consent
yes,
to your data being used in this way, and what
yeah,
happens to it, and who holds it? But I remember reading a study quite a few years ago when this was just happening. It wasn't a study; it was an article. It was a long read in the Guardian, I think,
hmm
and they got people to use these grief bots to represent people who they loved who had died.
yeah,
And look, it was a really positive response from people because, of
hmm
course, when we lose someone that we really love, we want every little reminder we can have of them. When we look back at videos and we look at photographs, and
we do,
of course we do, of course we do. So, is it really any surprise that we would like this? And of course, this is again where there's a lot of people working around what are the mental health repercussions of this. Does it delay the grieving process? Well, we can't tell people there's a right or a wrong way to grieve. If it's, my own take on this is that grief is a really weird thing, and it will fluctuate and it will hit you when you least expect it.
it does.
Yeah, and the thing is that if something helps you and it's not harming, then you're able to cope with things. Surely that can be quite a beautiful thing.
Yeah, no, I think you answered that very eloquently, and I think And it was only 100 years ago, so that people had never seen a photograph of their grandparents, or people had never ever heard their if they weren't alive when their grandparents or their parents were alive, they never heard their voice, they never saw a photograph of them, saw a video. Whereas, like I say, we had first of all we had gramophone recordings, then we had photographs, and then we had video, Cine 8, and we had smartphone photography. Now we have etc. etc. So we've developed all these things, and it's that sort of assumption that, well, grieving is a natural part of human life, therefore we must grieve. But why do you want people to hurt? As long as
Yeah,
again people are aware of where they are and they don't then believe that they're talking to
yeah.
their dead parent or whatever.
And and this is the thing. We know that there are people where it's gone terribly wrong and they have believed that the AI is sentient and they have believed that it's real. And sometimes they've got into really bad and negative spirals. In some cases, they have killed themselves because of this. And this is a problem, clearly. But it's
Yeah.
also, these are the ones we hear about because they are edge cases and they are
Yes.
there are few compared to perhaps thousands, if not millions, who are having positive experiences. That's not to say that we shouldn't take it seriously. We absolutely should,
No, no, no.
and the tech companies should be trying to put in better safeguards against this kind of
Mm,
thing. But clearly, I mean, I don't like the term AI psychosis. I don't think it's a helpful term. It's not a clinical
no.
term. However, in terms of being descriptive, yes, this clearly is something that when people are vulnerable, they may go down that path, and we have to find a way of trying to get them
Yeah.
back again.
There was a news article I read a few weeks ago, and it was in China, and the situation was that there was a grandmother, and she was very ill, and she only had sort of 6 months or so to live herself. Lived 1,000 miles away from her family, but really looked forward to her weekly calls with her grandson. And her grandson happened to be killed in a motorbike accident. But they had recordings of him and voice, whatever, and they created an AI version of him that she talked to once a week until she died 6 months later. She was never going to see him in person again anyway, and she didn't know. She went to her death not knowing he died. So that felt like I thought that was okay. I felt that was. I think rather than this grandson that she doted on, her only grandson, her only grandchild,
Yeah,
she looked forward to all week. This is one call on a Sunday to him, the sort of FaceTime call, whatever. That's all she looked forward to, and she had that until she died,
yeah,
even though he died 6 months before, and I didn't feel that was, even though she was being deceived,
yeah.
it didn't
That's really
feel like a
difficult.
bad thing.
Yeah, that's such a tricky one, isn't it? Because clearly that's brought her joy. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Mm.
I can't see what the benefit of what would have been of her. She wouldn't be able to go to the funeral because she was in nursing home
Yeah.
herself and she was very poorly, and it would have been her last 6 months. Yeah, having that negativity to it as opposed to the family, and they were challenged. The article, as you'd expect, the comments on it were half that's
Yeah.
wonderful, half that's terrible, and always it's the same way. Always turn off comments if you're a person asking.
Yeah. Oh,
But
yeah.
yeah, that is, I thought that was I thought it was really interesting.
Yeah.
Um, so one of the things you spend a lot of time on, which must be incredibly challenging, is the Responsible AI program. What questions or challenges are you trying to address? And probably the hardest question: what does
What does
responsible
responsible
actually
AI
mean?
mean? And that is a really good question, and we have deliberately left it very vague on the project. But there has been actually been quite a bit of pushback as well. You know, is it responsibility washing? If you're saying you're doing responsible AI, is it just a way of saying, yes, we're trying to make things a bit better? For us, it's about how do you make AI design and development and deployment fair
Okay.
and beneficial, if possible, to society, to individuals. Um, and it's really difficult because there's huge questions of power in AI and who gets to hold that power. And as individuals, as consumers, and sometimes as people where it's being used on us and we have no say otherwise, we don't hold the power. So it's also about looking for ways to find accountability and who gets to be accountable. We do lots of things in the project around. We hand out funding. We also carry out our own research.
Mhm.
So some of our research has been or is currently looking at things like how do you how do you have a system of assurance or benchmarking or testing to check that this is not just safe in a software way, but safe in a socio-technical way. Who's going to be impacted by it, and how do you measure that? Also questions around the way we talk about AI. So, for example, the metaphors we use, if we say, "Oh, it's an AI as a tool," well, it's not really a tool, though, is it? It's partly a tool. The tools aren't neutral, but also it's more of an infrastructure. It's got this whole ecosystem around it. Calling it just a tool is diminishing how big it is. We have to think about these things as well. So it's all about the way we frame the discussion. But essentially, it's the work that I do tends to be where people meet the technology. So individual lives meet technology, and how we try and do that in a way that is respectful of people and tries to have a beneficial outcome. And sometimes that can mean not using AI. Sometimes it can mean turning away from AI for certain cases.
And do you find that you come across or are challenged by people that are just wholly opposed to AI?
I do, and I'm not against that. I can see their position. So, in fact, I have a PhD student who's very anti-AI, is doing work around that, around rejection and resistance to AI, and I think it's difficult because now we've lumped the term AI to mean everything, but mostly
Yes.
descriptive.
Yeah.
And I hear people saying, I don't mean AI, I mean machine learning. To me, it's of AI, but so it's really interesting how we talk about this as
Yeah.
well. But yes, there are people who are incredibly resistant to it, and for very good reason. This stuff is burning up the planet, it's using all the water, it's exploiting labor in the supply chain. There are a million reasons why I am not comfortable with generative AI, but I am much more comfortable with the stuff we had before, the narrower forms of machine learning that have provided benefits and that we've been using for years without even thinking about it, like, for example, Google Maps or something like
Yeah.
that, where it's really convenient. But yes, I do talk to people who are really against it, and I have a lot of sympathy for that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was talking about my daughter earlier on, so she's very opposed to the environmental, water considerations, all that sort of thing. And it's really interesting because sort of trying to sort of, this sounds so patronizing, almost help her use AI, as exactly you said, in a responsible way, really, because it's not going away anywhere as far as I can see. It's something that you're going to have to adapt in certain ways. Oh, you might disagree, but
Maybe.
it's
I think there is pushback. I think we're going to see changes over the next year. Maybe not all generative AI companies will make it through. I'm
yes,
surprised OpenAI are still going, to be honest. But also, I think it is not delivering the transformative benefits that we were promised by these tech companies. And people are pushing back, and they're saying they don't want it in very specific places as well. So the creative industries are
yep,
saying there are points in production where this can be useful, but absolutely should not be coming into the creative parts in, for example, producing art or producing literature. Um,
hmm
and there are, so I think we are going to see, and as this stuff also gets more expensive and the companies are not getting a return on investment, they're going to start charging more and more. Already we see them bringing in charges. This stuff is not
Oh,
going to be,
token usage. Yeah, I have a few
yeah,
models sort of span up on a Mac Mini, and my token usage is you think something that 6 months ago was you could easily get done in a day. Now
mhm,
you either get locked out twice or you got to
yeah,
pay for extra tokens. So they
yeah.
yeah, I think from a power perspective, from a data center perspective, there just isn't enough AI capacity at the moment.
No, and so we will see people cutting back. I mean, their CEOs are starting to move away from it. It was being said that it would transform the workforce. Instead, we're getting people say it is cheaper for me to hire a junior software developer
I
than
know.
to buy tokens. So I think this whole "it is inevitable" thing isn't holding up the way it was thought it
Mm,
would. And while it may be there in I'm hoping that this kind of plateaus or even dips slightly, that we see things moving to a backwards a bit into a supportive role, in a background rather than backwards, a background role.
mm,
And that there's not just this relentless push any longer because it's not sustainable in many ways,
yeah.
in many uses of that
Yeah.
word. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm not asking you to talk specifically about the UK, but do you do you do you get as perhaps frustrated as I do sometimes about the speed at which governments address AI and AI opportunities, and I have a terrible obsession with watching US Senate hearings and Congress hearings, and just for the amusement value almost, I'm always staggered by some of the questions that they ask, and I don't feel it's that much different for the UK government, French government, German government, whatever. And an example would be that the UK government had a big fanfare this year. They invested £500 million in this sort of new in AI. Here's our big investment in AI. We're doing this. Then 2 weeks later, they announced a £660 million investment in minimising immigration. Okay, well, which is going to give the bigger benefit or not? So I don't know whether we have enough skilled people that there are enough skilled people out there. There's you, for goodness sake. Why aren't governments going to people that actually bloody understand this stuff rather than boosting it around as a political football?
Yeah, I think there's a lot there. I think AI is a geopolitical thing now. It is about who you have on side. The vast amounts of development are coming out of the US. China are sort of doing their own thing. We need to be seen to be aligning with those companies. I mean, I don't agree with that necessarily, but they don't want to be left behind. The government doesn't want to be left behind. Interestingly, we are now hearing more and more about sovereign AI. So the idea that we can have a homegrown thing. But of course, sovereign AI, when I first heard this, I was thinking, but how would that ever work? We don't have capabilities. Of course, they don't mean that it's going to be homegrown. They mean there'll be a room in the data center that just deals with the UK or whatever.
Yeah.
So it's very much about how this kind of pipeline where they can try and sort of put their data to one bit that they have control over. But of course, this has to be negotiated on a world stage, and there isn't regulation in place, and we are beholden to the US and their laws for this sort of thing because that's where the companies sit. So it's really, really difficult. So the aim is good. The idea of sovereign AI is good, but the practicalities of it are much more difficult.
Yeah, it's been interesting the last couple of months, and maybe it's just what's reported. A lot of the moral, ethical questions and approaches have been coming out of China, quite interestingly. There was a case quite recently where somebody lost their job, and their job was replaced by AI, and they sued, and actually they were found against the company, and China brought a law in saying that it was illegal to replace somebody with AI in the same way you couldn't make somebody redundant and then bring somebody else in the next day, which is amazing. I mean, I have no idea how broad that is in China. Obviously, it's a very sort of closed society, but you'd think that would be in America, whereas it feels like almost. So whether or not that means China is slightly behind and are a bit nervous, or China actually do care and are asking those challenging moral questions. And I think I just found that quite interesting that it wasn't anything coming out of the US. It was very much driven by China saying, look, we need to sort of perhaps think about this differently, come together, talk about it, discuss things, and create something global.
Yeah, and it's quite a different AI economy there. And I think the EU were the first place to have regulations specifically addressing AI.
Yes.
But China was second, and China were ready to roll out quite an overarching piece of legislation that I believe they've now paused and is going to be done more piecemeal. Whereas the UK and the US, I mean, the UK have talked for a long time about having an AI bill. It's never appeared. The US, Trump has rolled back the executive orders that Biden put in place.
Of course.
Yeah, I mean, right now, AI law in the US is either these bills that come into like a patchwork of bills, or it's people firing, doing lawsuits against companies. It's class actions. It's suing companies because of harm to families, or it's consumer power and it's brand shaming that's actually getting things moving, or workers starting to unionize, walking out of the workforce because they don't agree with specific contracts. So there's still not the regulation in place, and it's going to be a long time before we get regulation, if at all. Although the United Nations has now put together a scientific body, an advisory panel on AI. So that's a sort of a way to try at least keep on top of what's happening and have that insight.
It's hard, isn't it? Because one of my other passions, everybody's passion, I guess, is sustainability and the environment. And so many things happen. We have laws. We try to keep things at 1.5 degree warming. But then, as soon as something happens from a financial perspective, they all seem to get like Trump, drill baby drill, and can't believe we're not just ripping up the North Sea or whatever. And just economics, capitalism still seems to be the driving force behind the decisions that are made.
Yeah.
Just so a last question. You've been very, very kind with your time and your answers. And so, what are the two things again. So what are the questions that you are primarily focused on right now? And is there a question you keep coming back to that you're unable to resolve for your own satisfaction?
So I guess it's the good stuff I'm working on right now. Why are people rejecting AI? Because
Yep.
it's not just, some of it is this, we don't value this technology, we don't want to be part of it, but also there's very nuanced ways that people are engaging. Some of it is because they don't have the time or the money, and some of it is idealistic or ethical objections.
Yeah.
I'm curious about that.
Mhm.
Questions that I'd like to resolve. I guess I wish we had the data so that I could do much more on the beneficial sides of these relationships, these AI
Yeah.
companions, because we see these very negative edge cases, and we
Mhm.
know that it's a fraction of what users are experiencing. And we know that between them, Replika and Character AI probably have about 50 million regular users. And
Yeah.
that is only a fraction of the amount of people who are forming AI companion relationships, because a lot of people are doing it via things like ChatGPT.
Mhm.
So of all of those, I wish there was a way that we had data where we could find out just who's in these relationships and why, and what those demographics are, and
Mm.
how do they feel? Do they have real life relationships as well? Or whether that's online or in person? What do they have, a human relationship? What is a friendship group like? I just love to know all that. And we just don't have that data. It's just really hard
Yeah.
to get hold of. So we are sort of, the way we try to approach it right now is that, we look at things like discussion fora
Mhm.
online, which is obviously self-reported, but it gives us a really nice glimpse. Or we go and ask people on there, or we do interviews with people. Tech companies occasionally release fractions of their data
Mhm.
set. It's really hard to find out exactly what's happening, and they will come up with their own classifications of behavior, usually to say that they're not to blame for anything that's gone wrong. So I would
Yeah.
just love, I think that's the unresolved question, is who exactly are these users and what are they getting out of it? Because there are so many, I think, mundane interactions that just are a convenient and maybe lighten up your day a little.
Mhm.
Um, and and we don't know, we never hear about those.
No, and I think that's a general news truism, isn't it? Well, I think there was 11 bad news stories every one news story. You never get a headline saying no airplanes crashed today. But you
Oh,
get a headline tomorrow saying plane crashed, killed 100 people, and that's the whole industry goes right. And that's exactly, and it almost feels in a way that we seem to hold AI to a higher standard than we hold people. You think about all the massive headlines you read whenever a Tesla goes off the road or a Waymo goes off the road, whatever. But that's
yeah.
0.001%, and it's still 24% safer than humans driving. But we almost seem to hold them to a higher standard than we expect to ourselves, and whether that's, and a bit like you were saying before about the art question. So two things: one about the art question, and one would be about people using AI as a sort of therapist, I guess. So research showed that people that had this interaction with a therapist online, backwards and forwards, at the end of it, they were surveyed. How did you find it? Was it beneficial? Whatever. 82% of them said it was very good or excellent sort of therapy. Then they were told it was AI, and their satisfaction dropped to 20%.
Mm,
And the
yeah.
same with art. So somebody said, look at all
Yes.
these amazing images. I mean, gallery, which is fabulous. Wow, people came out. I think it was uplifting. I can't believe how nuanced this is. The artists spent years and years developing it. Then until afterwards, it was generated by AI, and they just thought it was worthless,
It's
completely
so interesting.
irrelevant. And it's amazing at how your eyes are seeing the same thing,
Yeah.
you're having the same interaction completely, but when you're told it's AI at the end, your satisfaction level drops.
And I
What?
think,
What? Sorry, I answered the question, but why is that?
well, I think it's a couple of things. I think it's that stance on what you feel about AI, but I think there's also there because you feel deceived, and people do not like feeling deceived.
Yes, yes,
And I think that really poisons you against it when you find out, if you feel you've been tricked, you're immediately
yeah, yeah.
going to react negatively. But
Mm.
I think there's also something there about, we consume arts and we consume
Hmm.
conversations and we consume all these things because it feels like a connection to another human who has been through what we've been through, and we look for emotion and meaning. And if it turns out it's created by something that cannot experience emotion and meaning, and we haven't been told that it's been created by an AI, then we feel deceived and we feel like we have been tricked. Whereas if we engage in a relationship with an AI where we know up front it's an AI, and even if it says that it loves us, we are already aware somewhere in the back of our mind that it can't really love us, but we go into it because we're willing participants in it.
Yes, that honesty and truthfulness, I guess.
I think so.
Thank you so much. You've been fabulous.
Well, thank you for having me.
I expected a lot, and you massively delivered. So no, I really appreciate you giving me your time. I know you're super busy, but thank you. Yeah, just keep doing what you're doing. I can't wait to keep
Well, I
following your
really
work
enjoyed
and
talking
watching
about this. So this has been a pleasure for me as well. So thank you.
Fabulous. Right. Thank you so much.
Great.